Prosecutors said that your story was lie after lie after lie. That's what they told the jury.
Kaiser não jogava nada, velho. Porque ele não jogava nada.
15 years in prison for counterfeiting dollars.
My time.
No, I ask you, I did borrow it. But that doesn't mean I'm a thief. I didn't grab it, I didn't take it, I didn't steal it.
$8 billion is gone.
Reed Slackens pled guilty to wire fraud, mail fraud, obstruction of justice, money laundering.
Eduardo Martins. He's a 32-year-old Brazilian conflict and war photographer.
Ana Delvey. One of the most infamous scams was done by Ana Delvey, real name Anna Sorokin, who pretended to be a wealthy New York socialite and managed to scam banks, businesses, and wealthy individuals out of millions of dollars. Delvey's slick persona and lavish lifestyle fooled many people into believing she was a genuine socialite, but in reality, she had no money and was living off the credit she managed to obtain through her fraudulent schemes. Delvey convinced many people to invest in her so-called art foundation and scammed over $200,000 from a wealthy friend who paid for her lavish vacation to Marrakech. She also spent thousands of dollars on expensive meals, hotel stays, and shopping sprees, all on credit. But her luck eventually ran out, and in 2019, Delvey was found guilty of several charges, including grand larceny, theft of services, and fraud. She was sentenced to 4 to 12 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution of over $200,000. This is just one example of how scammers have managed to con the world's elite out of their hard-earned money. Carlos Kaiser. Carlos Kaiser was a Brazilian footballer who had never played a professional match in his entire career. However, he still managed to secure contracts with some of the biggest football clubs in the world. How did he do it? By using his charm, faking injuries, and creating a false reputation as a talented player with the help of his well-connected friends. Christian Kaiser's fraudulent scheme was not only successful, but it was also intricate and well executed. He convinced club managers, coaches, and wealthy team owners to part with substantial amounts of money. Kaiser's ability to swindle an estimated $3 million from unsuspecting victims was a testament to his cunning tactics. He carefully targeted individuals who were passionate about sports and were willing to invest heavily in them. His reputation as a successful businessman and a former soccer player gave him credibility in the industry. Kaiser often presented his victims with fake documents and contracts, claiming they were investing in a profitable sports enterprise. Sometimes he would use the funds for his personal expenses, such as buying luxury cars and vacations. In others, he would use the money to fund his other fraudulent schemes. The consequences of Kaiser's scam were devastating for its victims, who lost their money and trusted in the sports industry. But eventually, the truth caught up with Kaiser, and he was arrested and charged with fraud. He spent 2 years in prison for his crimes, but even then, he manipulated the system by pretending to be sick and getting released early. So, if you think you're too smart to be scammed, think again. Even the world's elite can be fooled by a master manipulator like Carlos Kaiser. Victor Lustig. In the world of scams, a few individuals have carried out some of the most daring heists against the world's affluent. One such individual was Victor Lustig, a notorious con artist renowned for his confidence tricks. One of Lustig's most infamous scams was selling the Eiffel Tower to a wealthy scrap metal dealer by pretending to be a French government official. Lustig was a master of deception and knew how to prey on people's greed and vanity. He convinced the scrap metal dealer that the Eiffel Tower was in dire need of repairs and that the French government was looking to sell it for scrap. The dealer, thinking he had stumbled upon a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, agreed to buy the tower for a substantial sum. And it wasn't until the dealer tried to sell the Eiffel Tower for scrap that he realized he had been conned. Lustig was eventually caught and sentenced to 20 years in prison, but he escaped and continued his life of crime until his death. Number 4. Christophe Rocancourt. Meet Christophe Rocancourt, a notorious French con artist who has made a name by tricking wealthy individuals, including celebrities, out of millions of dollars. Rocancourt was a master of disguise who could easily assume different identities to gain the trust of his unsuspecting victims. Depending on his target's background and interests, he would pose as a wealthy European aristocrat, a Hollywood producer, or an investment banker. Despite being born into a working-class family in Brittany, France, Rocancourt was determined to live a life of luxury and wealth. He began his career as a small-time crook, Running petty scams and natural charm soon led him to target the wealthy and powerful. Rocancourt's modus operandi involved gaining the trust of his targets by pretending to be someone he was not. Often, he used his good looks and charming personality to lure them in, showering them with gifts and attention. Once he had their trust, he would use various elaborate schemes to defraud them of their money. Rocancourt's tactics were sophisticated, and he spared no one in pursuing wealth. He targeted Hollywood stars like Mickey Rourke, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and even socialite Pia Getty. Rocancourt would befriend them, gaining their trust by rewarding them with gifts and promises of fame and fortune. Once he had their trust, he would convince them to invest in his latest venture, promising huge returns on their investments. But Rocancourt's promises were nothing more than lies. He would take their money and disappear, leaving his victims penniless and humiliated. Rocancourt's schemes were so successful that he defrauded his victims out of an estimated $40 million. Despite his crimes, Rocancourt remained unrepentant. As a result of his fame, he wrote a best-selling book and appeared on TV shows. It wasn't until he was arrested in Canada in 2012 that he finally faced justice for his crimes. Bernie Madoff. Throughout history, frauds and con artists have targeted wealthy individuals with their cunning schemes in an attempt to steal vast sums of wealth from unsuspecting victims. Unfortunately, this is a practice that has continued into modern times. One of the most infamous cases of financial fraud occurred in the early 2000s when Bernie Madoff, a former stockbroker and financier, orchestrated a Ponzi scheme that defrauded his investors of an estimated $65 billion. Madoff's scheme was built on a foundation of deception and lies. He promised high returns on investments, and he initially delivered on these promises, which led to his clients' trust and confidence. However, as time went on, Madoff's promises became increasingly extravagant, and he began to use new investments to pay off earlier investors, a hallmark of a classic Ponzi scheme. Madoff's scheme was particularly effective because he targeted wealthy investors who were seeking high returns on their investments. These individuals often had large sums of money to invest, and they trusted Madoff based on his reputation and apparent success. Unfortunately, many of these investors lost their life savings as a result of Madoff's scheme. The fallout from Madoff's scheme was widespread and devastating. Many individuals lost their life savings, and charities and foundations that have invested with Madoff were also severely impacted. This case led to a widespread loss of confidence in the financial system and prompted calls for increased regulation and oversight. Eventually, the scheme collapsed, and Madoff was arrested and sentenced to 150 years. Many of his victims, including celebrities and prominent business people, lost their life savings, and the scandal sent shockwaves through the financial world. Reed Slatkin. Reed Slatkin, the co-founder of Earthlink and an investment advisor, was once a highly respected figure in the business world, especially among wealthy investors and Hollywood celebrities. However, he was also involved in a massive financial fraud that went undetected for over a decade. The Ponzi scheme, orchestrated by Slatkin, defrauded his clients of a staggering $600 million, leaving many of them in a financial ruin. Slatkin's reputation as a skilled investor and trusted advisor made it easy for him to lure his victims into his web of deceit. He used his connections in Hollywood and the business world to convince high-profile clients to invest in his investment schemes, which promised significant returns. However, rather than investing the money as promised, Slatkin used it to fund his extravagant lifestyle and pay off earlier investors, thereby perpetuating the Ponzi scheme. The scheme was so well concealed that it remained undetected for over a decade, during which Slatkin continued to attract new clients and expand his business. However, in 2001, his scheme finally came to light, and he was charged with 15 counts of fraud and money laundering. He eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 14 years in prison. The aftermath of Slatkin's fraud left a trail of destruction in its wake, with many of his clients losing their life savings and facing financial ruin. This case also exposed serious flaws in the regulatory system that allowed Slatkin to operate for so long without detection. Eduardo Martins. Eduardo Martins, a Brazilian fraudster, had a talent for deceiving people. He posed as a war photographer and successfully sold fake images to international news agencies. But that's not all. He also tricked wealthy individuals, journalists, and media organizations by stealing other photographers' work and creating a fake identity. The scale of his deception was jaw-dropping. Martins scammed people out of a staggering $120,000. But that's not all. He was sentenced to 14 years in jail for his crimes. Imagine spending over a decade in prison for trying to fool people. Martin's story is just one of the many instances where scammers targeted the world's elite and succeeded. It is a reminder that anyone can fall prey to a con artist, no matter how successful or savvy they are. And that's a wrap for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.